Hi, everybody. My name is Tane Danger. This is Better Minneapolis. You might notice I'm Tane Danger. I'm not Terry White. We're doing something a little bit different today where Terry asked me to come and be a guest on the show. And I thought, well, I'm very interested in things going on in Minneapolis civically and with the different races going on in this election that we have. But frankly, I have probably a lot less to offer, say, than the person who has been running this project this whole time and interviewing all these candidates, talking to all these smart people, Terry White himself. So I asked if it would be okay if we sort of flip the script this time, and I got to ask Terry a handful of questions and get the conversation going from there. So I'm very excited to be your host for a little bit of a different Better Minneapolis this time. I should just introduce myself very quickly. I'm Tane Danger. I'm the co-founder of Danger Boat Productions, which does a whole variety of different things using improv and theater to bring community together and host civic conversations, which I've been doing in Minneapolis, around Minnesota, and beyond for more than 14 years now. I'm very, very interested and care a lot about this city, the Twin Cities, the state of Minnesota. It's the heart of a lot of my work. And so I've actually really appreciated getting to read Terry's coverage and the stuff that he's been bringing out from candidates all throughout this cycle and even earlier than that. So I'm very excited to jump in, and I'm hoping that we all get to learn something. So, Terry White, thank you so much for letting me flip the script a little bit with you all here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been kind of nervous about it for the last couple of days because I don't usually answer the questions. I'm become somewhat comfortable asking them.
Fair.
But,
Same.
This is new, so we'll see how it goes.
If it makes you feel better, I'm the exact same way. It's just that I tricked you into letting me ask some of the questions here. So we're in the exact same boat. I'll ask an easy one just to get us rolling. Better Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you start this? What were you hoping this would be, and how is it now?
Yeah, so I started it in December of 2023 after I lost running for city council myself in Ward 8. And I really just didn't want to kind of give up on my civic involvement. I've always been really interested in local politics. And I think two things I learned during that election is one is that I love the best part of campaigning to me, the best part of politics, for me at least, was going door to door and hearing what people had to say and their actual questions about and hearing firsthand kind of what they care about as opposed to hearing about it in surveys or things like that.
Can I ask you already, were there things when you were going door to door that surprised you or changed sort of how you thought about things based on you actually having those conversations?
Several things. One, that it's not everyone agrees with me on this, but there's a lot of confusion over ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
I found that over and over again, and I know I've had Gene Massey on here. We've talked through it, and I sort of understand the logic behind it and what it's supposed to achieve, but just going door to door, I feel like sometimes it's an unnecessary obstacle that I feel like it confuses people. And in this election, forget it.
And by this election, are we talking about Minneapolis mayoral election or something? Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even particularly on strange things like the at-large park board, where you have two candidates, three running, it's ranked choice, and so it's this kind of process of elimination. And it also doesn't seem like one of the things I don't like as a candidate, and that I see in the races about it, is that instead of candidates focusing on the issues and their vision and getting out there has to be this whole extra strategy added on as to what's my strategy for getting second votes. And I understand that's supposed to make candidates sort of listen to other candidates more, but I don't know that it's really playing out that way.
I think that is fair. I've heard things like that too. I will say, just on a personal level, I do support and I think that ranked choice voting does a lot of good. I also really kind of get tired of the parlor games of ranked choice voting, and especially now that we're in an era where the campaigns are sort of playing these games and telling people like, oh, well, you should rank like this or whatever. I think that is probably, I don't think most voters are thinking about it like that, and it's not helpful. But at the end of the day, I still think that compared to the alternative of just like, well, these are the only real candidates like who have any chance of winning, so just pick between them. I think that was not particularly like enjoyable for a lot of people either.
Yeah, and kind of the flip side is I would not have run if it weren't for ranked choice voting, because I made this huge miscalculation that it would somehow work in my favor as a lesser known candidate, and that's not what happened.
So I want to ask more about that. I will just say, like, as a clip that people can look at later, if you are worrying or grappling with ranked choice voting, just rank who you want to win in the order that you most hope they will win. I really tell people, like, don't overthink sort of who should be my 2 and 3, and like where should and maybe if I do this, then this other person won't get all that stuff. None of us really know for sure how this is all going to play out, and I just think that it is an exercise in self-exhaustion. So my advice to everybody is rank who you want to be the winner first. Rank the person you would second most like to be the winner second, and so on and so forth, and probably don't think about it beyond that when you are filling out your own ballot. What else did you learn, though, talking to people?
Well, so I would say that there's a lot of people who don't know necessarily who their ward representative is, let alone park board and BET and stuff like that. So part of me doing the newsletter was to try and put more information out there and hopefully reach people so that they can educate themselves. So that was kind of an eye-opener, and it really showed me what a disadvantage you are when in our current political system you don't have any money, because so much of winning is just about name recognition, because it seemed like, and one of the things I really enjoyed, and this is kind of so my campaign theme or whatever was Better Minneapolis when I was running, so I just turned that into the newsletter. But I had like a blog on my campaign site, and I found that I really enjoyed doing that. I don't know if anyone ever read it, but I would just kind of lay out how I felt about different things, and I enjoyed doing that. So the door knocking, writing those things, and just wanting to stay involved. And the final thing I would say is that people are very, very concerned about hyper-local issues. And by that, I mean, like, they don't necessarily have a grand plan for, say, how to end homelessness, but they're very upset about the encampments on the end of the block from them.
Right.
And it seems like they get really upset, and they kind of start looking around for, which candidate they think is going to take care of, that issue, or if lights out on your block, or, and one of the things I heard a great deal walking around is almost everybody had a story about crime on their block, whether it was a car stolen, or their neighbor getting carjacked and thrown to the ground, or their garage getting broken into. And so that was pretty eye-opening.
And you were running in 23?
Yes.
23, yeah.
So it was a special election after 2 years because they did a redistricting.
Con rule. Yeah. So just one last piece on this door knocking, because one of the things I get really passionate about is I think that democracy at every level works best when people feel like they can be part of the process. Mm-hmm. So you did that. You got in there and you were part of it. And what you're describing, that going door to door, is probably to a lot of people the most intimidating element of this whole thing in a lot of ways. But it sounds like you got a lot out of it. So for somebody who maybe is thinking about like, oh, I've always wanted to serve or be part of an elected thing, but I'm really nervous. Like maybe it'll be awful going door to door, and people might yell at me or ask me things that I don't know what to do or say about. I don't know. What would you just say to somebody who's maybe nervous about that part of it?
It's character defining a little bit, because you are going to hear negative things. You are going to have hear just wild positions, and you're going to have to improvise a little bit, right? Like, you can go up to the door with your talking points and your brochure, but then someone's going to ask you an oddball question that's not in your notes, and you've got to kind of think on your feet a little bit and figure out how you're going to answer them.
I interviewed Tom Horner once, the former Independence Party candidate for governor, and he told me a story. This is on stage, that I think the very last question that he was asked by a voter when he was in that campaign for governor, which would have been 2012 maybe. Anyway, the very last question that he was asked was, somebody asked him, "What's your position on the Monroe Doctrine?" And he was just like, to him, it was just sort of like, I've said everything that I can possibly say. I've gone through every talking point, and this is where we're at now, is that people are asking me about the Monroe Doctrine. And it was kind of this funny illustration of the phenomenon you're talking about. You don't know what people are going to ask you about. So you got out of that. You started this. Did you, when you started Better Minneapolis, as the blog and the podcast and the videos, did you have you said you wanted people to be more involved. Did you have other goals? How is it working out in terms of when you started it, what you were hoping it would be to where it is now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's exceeded my expectations in how many people have shown interest, and I think that speaks less about me and more about like how hungry people are in the community to learn more about what's going on a very local level. And I think there's not a lot of people that are willing to sit through a city council meeting or a committee meeting, but other people like hearing what's going on. And it's a little bit of watching how the sausage gets made, and so I think people appreciate that, and that's why it's grown, really.
Yeah. So you have been doing interviews with a ton of people, civic leaders, candidates for office, former candidates, people who cover these races, all these different things. Are there things that keep coming up over and over and over again this election cycle, themes or particular issues that you feel like are just, you're like, oh yeah, we're talking about this again, like, interesting?
Yeah, well, I guess I should say, one is I started with the newsletter and it had no interviews or whatever, and I was kind of slow to get in to do that, and I think once people started reading the newsletter, then they were more open to when I asked them for an interview, and at first I would only do audio, and the only reason I'm doing video is because people tell me that's what people like, right? So it's not something I'm completely comfortable with just yet. What was the question, though?
The question was, how is this working out in comparison to how you thought it might go? The response, are you kind of getting where you hoped it would get, or is it completely different, maybe in a good way?
Well, it's been great. I've learned a lot about different subjects. I think that we have some really good people running for office in all these different places, and I think we also have some people doing great community work. So it's like I'm very happy to give some of them a voice in a medium that they don't necessarily always get heard in. So that I've really enjoyed doing. In some ways, it's like the door knocking, right?
Yeah.
It's like I get to hear what the actual people doing the work have to think.
Well, something I've heard you say, and I appreciate a lot about this format and structure that you're doing, is that there aren't a lot of spaces where we get to hear, especially these candidates, talk in this long form way, right? Like you might, I have hosted a couple of candidate forums and debates and things this cycle and many other cycles, and at best,
was it a forum or a debate?
We could get into that. I think it was a debate, but people don't like that word. And I'm very happy to talk at length about my strong feelings about how we structure candidate forums versus debates. But my point was that even like if I get to do that exactly the way that I hope to do it and really hold candidates accountable for their answers and really push them to be specific and ask them follow-up questions in a debate or a forum structure, at best I'm going to get to really kind of spend 3 minutes pushing them on an issue, where in this, you could talk to a candidate running for city council or mayor or school board for 10, 15, 20 minutes and really keep going until you feel like you have hopefully gotten to what their actual plan is, what they are thinking about, or if that's not there, you reveal that.
I mean, yesterday I talked to Elliot Payne for an hour and 20 minutes, and we could have gone on much longer. So that was great. And I hope people enjoy hearing things in depth. But I will just say about having been in forums as a candidate and then now sort of watching them and trying to report on them, I think people like them because they think that they get to contrast the different candidates and answers. But I found, and this is maybe just me personally, is that not everyone excels in that format, right?
Sure.
So it's like, okay, talk about something that's extremely important, like homelessness, and give us an answer in 1 or 2 minutes. And I just found that frustrating because that it's a big topic with lots of complication, and I think you have to oversimplify things, and there's often no recourse. Like if someone starts off talking about homelessness and then spends the rest of the time, bashing their opponent or whatever,
there's nothing to do.
You can't circle back. But in this format, if you say something that I don't understand, I can ask for clarification, and I like that.
I will pick up on what you're saying, and I wrote a piece for the Star Tribune earlier this year on this exact question of forums versus debates, and my point was, to some degree, I agree with what you're saying. They are not everybody's strong suit, and nor necessarily do they need to be. It should not be necessarily a prerequisite for being in office. However, what is deeply frustrating to me from a democratic space is that so many of the forums we set up are, we are going to ask a question about a big issue like homelessness or crime or property taxes, and then each person is going to get 60 seconds to answer. And the moderator is just going to basically be a timekeeper. And I can ask you, what is your plan for, controlling property tax increases over the next 4 years? And you could talk about your vacation to Spain last year for the full minute. And then the moderator would say, thank you very much. Next candidate. And they would just move down the line. And that just drives me batty because I don't learn anything. And obviously I used an extreme example, but we do hear candidates, they just talk, right? You'll say, well, what do you think we should do about public safety? And candidate will say, I think everyone should feel safe in their neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. How? Tell me, what does that mean? What are you actually proposing you would do or whatnot? But so many of the forums, because of the structures that we have put in place and the nonprofits that run them, feel like they are not equipped or comfortable actually following up with candidates and saying, I understand that is what you were saying. I need some specifics. People want to hear how you will actually accomplish what you do. That they end up being these exercises that do very little good in informing the public, which seem to be what the goal should be. And I don't think that these necessarily are, not at all. They are not meant to be mean or aggressive, but I think that there is something valuable about saying, please explain your position and why it is different than the people you are running against, so that voters can make a choice between you all. But we don't do that very often. Yeah. So many of the forums are that just sort of timekeeping piece. That's what drives me a little nuts. And I was glad to get the opportunity to do at least a couple forums where we didn't follow that. We did more of a, tell me why you're different than these other people.
So in the forum that you moderated
for the Minneapolis mayoral campaign,
did you learn something that you hadn't known before?
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of specific issues that we got into that I didn't know before. I mean, there probably the moment that got most pulled out of that debate forum was I asked all of the candidates about what were sort of the points at which they would say you need to break up a homeless encampment. All of the candidates said we don't want to break up homeless encampments. It's not sort of like what we're aiming to do. But Jacob Fry, Dwayne Davis, Jazz Hampton all said, here are the conditions where, there's violence that's happening there. The encampments are reaching a certain size. There's a threat to public safety or something like that, like these different things. I asked Omar Fateh about this, and did not really provide an answer, kind of talked about the things that lead to homelessness encampments. And I said, I appreciate that. That's valuable. But the question was, are there moments when you would actually get to a place where you would break up an encampment or disband it? And again, he kind of like moved around the issue without actually answering. And I think that like I ended up having to ask him at least 3, if not 4 times. And by the end, he said, I wouldn't, because if I were mayor, we would never get to a point where we needed to do that, and so it wouldn't ever come up for me, and that was I think that difference between them, that they have these different like ways of thinking about where that line is for them. I think that was telling. I think the fact that again, Jacob Fry, Dwayne Davis, and Jazz Hampton all have in their mind that they want to, if they can, they have a goal of reaching at least the charter demanded number of sworn officers in Minneapolis, where again, Omar Fateh said, well, I want to increase public safety, but I'd really like to do it in different ways if we can, and I would be open to amending the charter so that we don't have to have as many sworn officers. And that difference between him and some of the other candidates, I think, was interesting. And then just like the last piece I would say is the real emphasis. I feel like Jazz Hampton and Dwayne Davis are really trying to run, in my vantage point, on there's a lot of policy questions here. We have answers for those policy questions, but at the base of this, there is an issue where relationships are broken. People aren't trusting each other in Minneapolis politics and around this, and we are trying to present ourselves as people who could fix that. We could help make it so that the conversations within the city of Minneapolis government, between the council and the mayor's office, between city services and the mayor's office, between the mayor's office and the county, could be much better if somebody like me, who has these relational skills, which are almost less policy and more interpersonal, if somebody like me was in there. They are really running on that, it felt like, in a way that did feel different to some degree. I don't want to say that Omar Fateh and Jacob Fry don't care about, but this is what Dwayne Davis and Jazz Hampton are leading with in everything that I hear them say. Hearing that as like where they're going with first was interesting.
Well, in that vein, I mean, I think one of the things I've learned in doing the interviews is that the city gets so much attention, Minneapolis, and I don't talk about St. Paul. Just, I mean, not that they're not a great city, but
I will talk about, if anybody wants to have me on Better St. Paul, I will be there.
Right. But I've really been also trying to talk about the county more, and I feel like it just doesn't get ever covered anywhere, and I feel like that's a big gap in our local coverage. And maybe after this election, because I think all the commissioners are being up for re-election next year, I hope to be able to start covering that a little bit more, because they have a budget that's bigger than the city, and a lot of the problems that people are upset about, particularly homelessness, they play a huge role in providing the housing and services and stuff. And so I have been trying to figure out a little bit, like, why do they just kind of operate under the radar? Why does no one pay attention to them?
I mean, it probably goes to where you started, that a lot of people don't pay attention to some of these different things. In a way, because of, there's probably a long answer that somebody with a classics background could answer for us as to why the figure of a mayor is just sort of crystallized in our minds as something that we get very interested in. And it probably has something to do with it being that solo character almost in some ways. Whereas in a county structure, you have a board. I was actually with chair of the Hennepin County Board, Irene Fernando, last night. And I have said many times, this is not to pick on Commissioner Fernando or anybody, but wherever you are, county commission is probably the best elected job that you could have. You have large budgets relative to a city, or even in some ways, like, with considering the amount of demands that a state has, you got money to play with. I don't want to say play with. You have money to move around and do things with. You have services. You have power to do things. And yet, because there's it's not crystallized in people's minds the same way their mayor or their city council is, you can fly a little bit under the radar and do some of this stuff, I think, in my experience, without, people writing lots of nasty letters to the editor about you, or showing up at your house, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and again, I think that's another reason why I started the newsletter, is because it was disturbing to me, some of the vitriol that I saw online and some of the attacks. And so I wanted to put something out that was different than that wasn't just, because sometimes some of the candidates, I mean, right now it's like just the attacks are constant.
Yes.
Right? And so I wanted to do something positive. It's why I've tried to invite people from different political groups to talk and stuff, because what you were talking about, like how some of these candidates are running on the idea that they can unite different groups within the city and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like there's too much heat in some of these elections. I mean, people are applying for a job, really. And, in some ways, I would much rather the mayor just be like they have in other cities, like a city administrator or something, where it's like a little bit more technocratic and not, so heavily charged with their values. But so I wanted to put something out that was a little bit more thoughtful, that would hopefully get people talking about the ideas rather than the specific candidates, which makes me think of your project that you just did in Kingfield. I would love to hear more about that.
Sketches of Minnesota?
Yes.
So, thank you. It's a nice to get. So, Sketches of Minnesota is this project my company, Danger Boat Productions, which is a theater and improv company, does in partnership with the Minnesota Humanities Center, which, if you've never looked at the Minnesota Humanities Center, is an amazing statewide organization that both funds and puts on its own humanities programming all over the state. In short, Sketches of Minnesota is this project we've done for 2 years now, where we go to different towns and communities. We work with a local host committee to host a community meeting. There's a free meal, usually catered by a local restaurant or community group. And we really try and do work to get as many people from the community to come as possible. And people from different parts of the community, not just sort of like the usual suspects, not just people like you and me who go to every civic thing that's happening, but the folks who maybe wouldn't normally show up to an evening town meeting or something like that. Because we say, well, there's going to be a free meal. You're going to get to meet some neighbors and talk to them. And what we do is we have them all get together around small tables, and we ask them to talk with their neighbors, hopefully some people they've never met before, talk in their community at these tables about what is great about your community, what are things people get wrong about your town or community, what are the misconceptions people have, what do you worry about, or what are the divisions, or what are the challenges that are present here in your community that worry you. And then what do you imagine the future of this place would be? And so that's what people are doing over dinner. And it's 45 minutes or an hour of people having these conversations. We have some guided facilitation to try and make it a good conversation, make sure everybody at every table gets a chance to answer, and there's a good back and forth, and people can share and listen to each other in a healthy way. The thing that makes this different than other town meetings is that we're an improv theater company. And so we bring along our troupe of very talented improv actors who then go and drop into these different conversations. And they're listening at the different tables. And then they take the stage after dinner and they say, we were listening to all these different conversations, everybody talking about what's going on in this town, what people love about it, what are the things people worry about. And then they do a show, about a half-hour unscripted improvised show, reflecting back to the town or the community. Here's what we heard you all say about this place. Right. And it is very funny. It is laugh out loud, like comedy stuff, but then there's also sometimes very poignant moments. There's sometimes through that theater piece, can lift up something that, you know, is maybe a little bit uncomfortable. People know that it's a thing, but they don't maybe love to talk about it, but it's brought up, and so we can present it on stage in a way that they can kind of process. And then afterwards, we'll have a talk back so that the community can kind of hear other people, again, talk about what they saw in the performance, what they heard in the conversations, what they sort of are getting out of this. And we have done this. We did this all throughout 2024 and now 2025. We've done 18 of them, and most of them have actually been in greater Minnesota. We've been everywhere from International Falls to Winona, Morris, Fergus Falls, Rochester, Rosemount. I'm going to New York Mills actually next week. But then, as you noted, earlier this summer, we did our first one ever in the Twin Cities proper, where we did one in our neighborhood of Kingfield, Minneapolis. And it was the first time we had done it as sort of a neighborhood versus a small town project. And it was very interesting. There were some things that were very similar and some things that were different. But at the end of the day, I'll wrap up by saying I love this project because we are in a time where there's a lot of vitriol and a lot of nastiness, particularly online. And what we find when we actually can get members of a community, of a town, to sit together and talk to each other, they have great conversations. We haven't had one of these yet that has fallen apart or people have started yelling at each other. No matter where we go to the most rural, like small towns, we go to these metro areas, we go to very red places, blue places, purple places. We have all different kinds of groups of people, and we just find over and over again, if people sit with each other and talk to each other, it doesn't mean that they agree. Doesn't mean that they're like, oh, I think that by the end of this, you were right about like that new golf course that we should put in. But they will walk out and be like, you know what, I get it. I get where you're coming from, even if I still think that you're not right. And I think that that's really healthy and something we need to practice.
Yeah, it reminds me, a couple of things. I think that there are candidates for statewide office that should look in on what you've been finding out and, to try and get a new perspective maybe on how the state is leaning or thinking about. But even just today, I was listening and I've heard this from several different commentators, how, if it's a football field, most people are actually within the 40-yard line, right? So left of center, right of center, but because we've become so team focused, we just shun all the ideas that are coming from the other side. And that's what I kind of hope to accomplish a little bit is that not only can we recognize that some of the ideas might be worth considering from the other side, but if you're not listening, it just makes the division harder.
Absolutely. You have to listen. This is my number one thing, is that you absolutely have to listen. One of the truths, I would say, capital T truths out of this project to me, is that everybody wants to be heard and they want to know somebody is listening to them. They actually care about that more than they care about somebody agreeing with them. Right. But if you are respectful and caring enough to say, I really am going to hear you out. I want to hear what you have to say. People do value that, and they will have a different kind of conversation if they believe that you are entering that authentically. That has been my experience over and over again, that listening piece is a thing that we go into a lot of conversations thinking, well, here's what I want to say, and I'm just going to kind of wait for my turn to say it, or I'm going to try and maneuver this conversation to a place where I can get out what I want this other person to hear. And if you can practice being sincerely interested in what somebody else is saying, again, not saying that means that you have to agree with that other person.
Yeah.
But if you can really be like, I actually want to hear and understand what you think and why, and I value that, I find over and over again that changes the kind of conversations that you have with people. It opens up a space where they are much, much more likely to listen to you as well.
Right.
And the other piece I would just say on your note about, a lot of people living in a political 40-yard line space, like, I think that's right. I actually go a little bit further when I talk about this. My feeling is that almost everybody, the more you talk to them, the more that we are constellations of political opinions. That very, very few people that I meet in doing this work just, line up as like a 60% Democrat or a 70% Republican or anything like that. That if you talk to somebody, you'll be like, okay, so you really believe this on economic issues, but your views on some social issues are like way over here. And then actually when it comes to this thing happening in this community, you're here. But when you talk about international stuff, you're like over here. I think that is just a good kind of humbling reminder, because we do want to do this. Again, it's sort of a natural, probably organizing function of being human, that we want to be like, okay, you belong in this category and you belong in this bucket and you are like this, and I kind of know what you're going to be like this. And I get that. And I also just find over and over again, the more you talk to people, the more you find we are complicated beings, which I actually think is really good and healthy, right? Like if I know that, oh my gosh, Terry, I totally disagree with you on this issue, there's a way in which I might just write you off. But again, my experience is that I might be like, oh, you're totally wrong about this. But then there's like 6 other things that you and I totally align on that maybe just don't fit with that other thing somehow. And if I keep myself open to, okay, this we like don't see eye to eye on, but there's all these other things that are interesting, then that's where you actually have space to do stuff together and to figure out how to move forward.
Well, so I'm going to steal an example from someone else, but it's like if we're at this place where it's like if you're on the red team and I'm on the blue team, I so distrust you that even if you are an award-winning chef and give me a recipe for fish, I won't cook it. And I'll just say, I won't even try your fish. And it has nothing to do with your politics or anything like that, but I've identified you in this different group. And so everything you say at that point becomes something I can disregard.
And that is a great setup for one of the other things I say to folks about this work that I'm doing, but I also think it feeds into what you're doing with this, which is, sometimes when I talk to people about this work, I'm going all over the state talking to different communities and different groups, all different politics or whatnot. Some people, not but there are some people who are like, oh, well, that sounds like really, like, I bet you get a lot of people who think like this, and isn't it really uncomfortable or really icky to talk? And I'm like, no, it's great. I love talking to people who have all these different perspectives and points of view. Again, I don't agree in a lot of cases with everybody's point of view, but think about how boring life would be if you only ever talk to people who just align with you and just think like you do.
Right.
And this is a thing that we do in so much of our social media culture, and I worry a lot that we do in politics, where it becomes like a purifying exercise. How distilled can we make a particular point of view, and how much can we sort of excise people who don't align with this? And I think that, again, there's probably all kinds of sociological reasons that happens. But I just keep encouraging people just for it's not sort of, don't think about it in terms of this is good for the civic society and we're saving democracy. I think we probably are doing those things by doing this. But honestly, just for like yourself, your life will be more interesting if you can find ways to talk to people who have different points of view than you do, if you can find ways to listen to people who see things differently than you do, and really try and grapple and think about that and let that inform then how you think. Not necessarily that you end up aligning with them, but just something that you didn't know before that. To me, like, that spice is like what life is all about, and it's great, feeds into exactly what you're saying. I want to try the fish that somebody else makes, and it makes it much more interesting. And I think that is also part of what you're doing in this project, is that you are lifting up a lot of different voices and a lot of different perspectives. You're having different candidates on who people might not have heard otherwise. So that was going to be one of my questions to you. Are there any people who you hadn't really spent any time with before you did an interview like this with them, and then by the end of it, you're like, wow, that was really interesting. That was almost like I hadn't really thought about, and I'm going to be thinking about what you said for, I'm sure, a lot of them. But were there any ones that really stick out?
Well, so recently, I just interviewed Bob Fine. It's out today, but I think on his website, he has a graph about the how much less Minneapolis gets in local government aid than it used to, and
oh man, LGA. That used to be the hottest button thing. I love that we're getting into this. This is where certain people are getting real excited and other people are like scrolling through what other videos they could watch. But go on.
Well, it's because I've been kind of like generally in favor of, I think the state should be giving the city more money, but I think seeing that the actual amount where it went from, I think, 120 million down to 80, and just it's feeding into sort of this larger narrative that's kind of building up in my head about how we're giving a lot of political power over to more rural or less populated areas, right? So it's like I feel like some attention, and it's boring as heck to look at all these finance stuff, but a lot of the stuff that the city wants to do is dependent on funding, right? And so, but it's hard to get people's attention to talk about stuff like that. And, I definitely, even in this role, have felt, certain pressures, because I want what I'm doing to be watched and read and thought about, but it's like, so it has to be interesting to a certain extent, right? A 4-page treatise on local government aid is just going to lose people.
You might find your audience, but yeah.
Yeah, if so, but those things are important, and
right.
So.
Well, I think the more you can tie it back to why that matters for people, that is absolutely true. So was Bob Fine one of the people who you were like, I'm leaving this sort of with a different perspective or take?
Certain he seems confident in what he's looking to do. I mean,
he's been around the block.
He's a long time, and so people like that. I do appreciate experience to a certain extent, and they know kind of the rails and what they want, and they're not backing away from their positions, and they sort of have some experience to back them up. So that gives me insight in talking to people like that.
I've interviewed a lot of folks over the years, and I always find there's something really interesting where there are people who can be really, really smart and intelligent on paper or like for policy and whatnot, but then it's like very difficult in a conversation. Has there been anybody who you felt like you've really had to kind of like drag it out of them? Maybe you don't want to say.
Yes, but I guess I would say, like, after this, that I feel like the door knocking and talking door to door is a really good way to hone your message.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've got maybe 2 minutes as
Maybe.
someone's
Yeah.
in the middle of doing dishes or whatever, and I feel like the communication part of it, and this is like a larger conversation about how, I mean, in general, our communication skills are dwindling as we spend more time isolated and whatnot. But it really helps to refine your message and know what you want to talk about, I think. And some people out there could use a little bit more refinement and tightening. Of
So
their
polite.
message.
That's
You know?
good. That's nice. Okay. So, in terms of the candidate, like, I don't. How are you feeling? You were said at the top, like, you feel like we have good candidates kind of running in these elections in Minneapolis. So, I don't know. This is just a big, broad question. How are you feeling about Minneapolis right now in late October 2025? We're weekend days, a week and change out from an election. You feeling good, optimistic, positive, worried?
Well, I was one, I feel like the whole election process goes way too long. I wish we could just like get it down to 8 weeks.
Like a UK system almost,
Yeah,
or something.
we would spend so much less money, and I get that it's harder for like lesser known candidates to educate the public, but even now, like people are just, a good portion of people are just tuning in. But it is really long, and I was thinking now, like I feel like it contributes to the in-group and out-group sort of dichotomy that happens because we're constantly in election mode, right? Like
Yeah.
as soon as this is over, then it's the state one,
Right.
and so it never ends because and that and when you're in an election, you're so kind of gung ho trying to promote your candidate as opposed to say trying to promote your party's ideas or working on what's a coherent platform for the Democratic Party, which I think really needs to be addressed. And so you're just constantly in my candidate against everybody else mode, and I don't think that's serving us well.
Yeah.
You know.
That's fair. That's good. Let me ask you the flip side of something. You talked a lot about door knocking. If somebody who watches this has a candidate, maybe a candidate for city council in Minneapolis or mayor, has a candidate knock on their door, right? Like somebody comes and knocks on their door. What would you say they should ask those candidates?
Oh, that's a good question. That's funny. Okay. Well, obviously, I think there's the big three pillars, which are crime and housing. Those are the first two things that come to mind. So you hear those things over and over again. I guess I would encourage them to ask some of those really local questions. Like in my area, it's like, well, what are you planning to do with 38th in Chicago, right? Or be specific about, how you're going to increase revenue. Or one thing I feel like could be talked about in general more is, what's the direction we want Minneapolis to go in? Like when you look at it 5-10 years down the road, what do you want to see, right? I was feeling pretty decent about the direction of the city, like no, things aren't going to collapse or whatever. And it was.
It's very Minnesotan. I was feeling good. Things aren't going to collapse, so that's about as good as we can hope for. Very Midwestern.
But I was upset to see Target laying off 1,800 people,
Yeah.
and I feel like there's not enough talk about economic development, and I especially like. Say in the mayor's race, what do you want out of a mayor? I mean, for me, I feel like the mayor should be the number one cheerleader for the city. And, there's a lot of things they should be doing, but they should be out there on the front lines trying to attract businesses, trying to attract people to move to the city. Like they have to be the ultimate optimist, right? And I don't. So I would ask them, I guess, if candidate comes to your door, what are they doing to make what's their vision for making Minneapolis a place that people want to move to, that they want to open a business in, and try and see like what's their optimistic projections for the city.
Yeah. I think that that's great. I think that that is good. I would offer, and this is kind of my tag on to almost every question in a race like this where we have multiple viable candidates, in my estimation at least, and then ask that, or whatever your issue is, and then say, and how is it different than your opponents? Right? Like why should I put you first on my ballot if this is the thing that I care most about versus the other folks? Because again, I just feel like at this point, by the time people watch this, they'll probably have about a week left. And so there isn't a ton of time to sort of like be like, oh, a little bit of, it's like we really need to know like why you versus this other person, right?
Well, and yes, but it is difficult, like in the mayor's race where there's 15 different candidates. And so I kind of feel like this is where some sort of primary could be useful in our system, so that we can get it down to the viable candidates. But as I say that, I've actually, you asked about like kind of some of the surprises. I haven't interviewed Brenda Short, but I've seen her speak like multiple times, and she's had some ideas that have really struck me as being that surprised me with like their innovative thinking, right? Like one of them was there was a senior care facility that was for sale, and she wanted to see the city buy it and like turn it into a homeless facility. Right. And I was like, well, there's a very practical idea that since she said that building's been bought. But and another one of her ideas that I hadn't considered was a way to help senior citizens with property taxes, and essentially allowing them to delay paying property taxes so that they can stay in their homes, and then when they eventually pass, then their estate pays the property tax, right? So they can. And I was like, well, that's a really great idea, And then I thought I saw something that the city might actually have a program like that already in place, but I don't. I would like so. I kind of want to cut out some of the non-competitive candidates, but I also appreciate when they have interesting ideas like that. So I'm kind of a mixed. So to close out this rambling statement here, yes, ask them how they differ from their opponents, but in some races that's pretty hard.
Okay, I want to ask you just maybe at least one more thing about
flash round.
Sure. Well, I only have one question,
what do you
so that'd be a
think
quick.
of those in the forums debates, the flash round? Like,
I think that some of them have been good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, especially considering how a lot of those forums are normally run, as I've already complained about, where you don't actually get a real answer.
Yeah.
At least with some of those flash rounds, you get an answer because it's usually like a yes or a no question. And again, if my goal in thinking about a forum is I should be able to tell if I vote for this person, like it is this direction. If I vote for this person, is this direction. And some of those flash questions have given you like these two go that way and these two go that way, and that's helpful. So I think that it's good. I think that there's definitely some questions that's totally unfair, right? Like which you've already identified. I feel bad when I moderate a forum being like, what needs to change about public safety in Minneapolis? You have 60 seconds. Like that's an impossible thing. And I always try and basically give them 60 seconds and then listen to what they're saying and then say, okay, you said this, like I'm going to give you another like 30 or 60 seconds to like explain this element of what you're saying. There's some that hopefully you can do that, but that is a long-winded, not flash answer to your question, which is I think they're okay.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you hate them?
Oh, I guess to your point, it depends on what the question is. I mean, it was very illuminating. The one they asked, I forget which the form was. Like, of all the mayoral candidates, do you favor like punishing the police chief for the handling of that ice raid or
the Bloomington
Lake, and that showed that like all the candidates wanted to punish the police chief except for Fry, and so that was pretty telling, I thought. But most of the time, they're not that stark a question, I guess. And then when I went to the League of Women's Voters mayoral forum, it's supposed to be yes or no, and people would still talk.
Yeah.
So.
I did one like that with the Minneapolis mayor one about taking buses off Nicollet Mall, which well, people should go back and check the transcript. If memory serves, I know Jacob Fry basically does want to take buses off Nicollet Mall. My recollection is that Fate, Davis, and Hampton all are different shades of probably not or explicitly not. But that was as close as I probably got to it.
Where do you stand on that?
Oh, I can debate it both ways. Like, I think that here's what I would say honestly is, I actually think it could be delightful in terms of the Nicollet Mall. You can imagine the string lights across Nicollet Mall
with your umbrella.
Yeah, there's an accordion player there 24/7, which would drive people who live there insane. There's cafes that have seating, and it's walking down the streets of Paris or Amsterdam or Buenos Aires or whatever it is, and it's just lovely and beautiful. My worry is, and I think that there's some precedent for this in our fair city, of we do the first part, which is take the buses off, and then we don't really follow through on the execution of doing all of the work and programming and infrastructure build and investment that would be required to turn that into this bustling, beautiful pedestrian mall.
Right.
And it then, as opposed to the accordion player and the string lights, you get the tumbleweeds that you are ducking as you go down there.
Or like, so a friend of mine who's a photographer for the New York Times was here to take some pictures of a sculpture, a light sculpture was on Nicollet Mall, and it took him a very long time because he couldn't get pictures without homeless people in them. And then they also had those chairs. I don't know if you remember, they put out those colored chairs, and then they had like a fire pit. Well, now they had to, I think, fence off the fire pit. I think the chairs are all gone. And again, it's because this isn't.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to get very Jane Jacobsy here, which is like my philosophy on this is not. I mean, obviously, we don't want anybody to be housing insecure. We want everybody to have homes. There is not some part of my vision that's like you make it so that like Nicollet Mall is a poor person free zone, and like everybody it is just sort of like a playground for
it's a gated
it's a gated mall. That is not the vision.
Yeah.
I do think though that with things like that, the Jane Jacobs answer to that would be that you have a lot of people and there's just sort of a sense of community and safety, and that because right now probably your friend in part was like, well, there's something about this place where it is odd because that is all maybe I am seeing, depending on where they were and how this setup was. I'm only seeing unhoused people who are just sort of meandering around that way, and that feels for better or worse, like uncomfortable and not inviting to folks who are not good for a New York Times photo. But I think that the answer to that is not to try and push those people out, but is to get it so that lots of people are there, and that everybody, again, you walk through a large city, you walk through a New York, or I'm from South Florida, you walk through like parts of Miami or whatnot. There's all different socioeconomic classes and things all there moving around. And again, I think that just feels better because it feels like, oh, we're all kind of in this thing together, and there's more eyes on the street, to just circle out the Jane Jacobs things.
I guess my point is, and I'll let you get to your last question.
Oh yeah, but I forgot about that.
You mentioned the follow through. It's like we're really good about maybe having a good intention,
Yeah.
and then the follow through is much harder. And a lot of times we'll come through with these good intentions, and we seem to not want to play like devil's advocate and be like, well, but what if it doesn't work
Right.
out the way we think? What
Yeah.
if it isn't, families picnicking on Nicolette? It turns into like an avenue for drug sales or whatever. I mean, not that that's going to happen, but I think we don't spend enough time playing out the different scenarios. Sometimes.
I definitely think that we Midwest and Minnesota culture is conflict avoidant, and so when something isn't working very well, a lot of us sometimes don't want to engage. We just kind of want to look the other way, but that doesn't really help. We need to look at it and then be like, okay. And it needs to be like that. That's one of the things I teach in like a variety of different like courses and things that I run is like looking at something and being like, that didn't work. Like that is part of the iterative process of coming up with good ideas. Very few things just work 100% the first time you try them. Usually it's like, okay, we tried this. 20% of what we were trying to do there worked. Let's take that 20% and then like build on it and see what else we need to do in order to get it closer to where we want to be.
Yep.
But you're right. Very often we are like, oh my God, it didn't work. Like I can't.
Well, and this is where the sort of the attacking, sour nature of some of our politics, particularly social media, gets in the way of getting at a good solution, right? Because like people become tentative about admitting, I tried this, it didn't work right. Right? Because then they just get attacked. So either you don't try or you take a timid approach.
Right.
And so I think that it does hamper like progress. So
what is the future of Better Minneapolis? What do you hope that this keeps doing, grows into? What would you like it to become?
Well, I mean, one thing I've definitely found in doing this is it's very hard to support yourself. Like this, I can't support myself.
Is this asking for sponsors?
Paid
so
subscribers are great.
Paid subscribers or I don't know, Target. If you are looking to win back some goodwill, then you could become the underwriter of Better Minneapolis.
And it's made me think a lot about like what's the future of media in general. I mean, people want local media. It's hard to get them to pay for local media, right? So, I mean, I'm thinking about it. I don't know. I mean, I guess in the ultimate vision is I would, have a better St. Paul and have other people than just myself who are part of kind of like this.
I can't wait till you set up franchises. Better Matamidi,
like
Better Detroit Lakes.
Yeah. A decentralized system. Like I could certainly show people what I'm doing and things like that and get them rolling. And but I don't know. We'll have to see this where it goes. Yeah. I'm not sure yet.
That's exciting. And if people do want to, support or help, I'm sure you make that pretty easy. But like, do they just? There's a button on the podcast and the thing.
Subscribe to the newsletter is a great way, and you can become a paid subscriber. That's much appreciated.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I have. I don't know. Okay. I grilled you the whole time. Is that good, or is there anything else you wanted to ask me?
Well, I'll ask you what you asked me. What do you think people? Well, I guess people at the door should be asking a candidate when they come, because they're gonna be out there every day.
I do have so one of the things in all the forums and debates I've moderated over like a dozen years now is I do find it very interesting to ask candidates, why are you running for this office? And that requires you knowing a little bit about the different offices. Like, what is the difference between a mayor or a county commissioner or a city council? But I'm guessing if you made it to the end of this project, like this conversation, you probably know a little bit about this.
Yep.
And so if somebody comes to your door and they're like, I'm running for city council, or I'm running for mayor,
or park board,
or BET, or whatever it is, like, why that? And what is it specifically that you think you can do in that role that you couldn't do in some other way, right? Like, I'm a big believer in, like, you are doing, like, work that you believe in, trying to make a better Minneapolis that doesn't require you to be an elected official, right?
Thank goodness.
Yeah. There's all kinds of ways to do good in your community that doesn't require you to have a title and an office and a staff and all those kinds of things. Now, that's not to discourage people from doing that. If you want to do that, that's good. But then I think it's very fair to ask people, like, okay, what is it specifically in this office that you think you can do that you haven't been able to do somewhere else? Because frankly, I do think that I have met candidates over the years. I'm not saying this specifically of anybody running this cycle or anything, but just in general, I have run into candidates and interviewed candidates over many years who, frankly, like, yeah, they're like, you ask them that and they don't really have a great answer. Actually, there's the famous is that Roger Mudd was interviewing Ted Kennedy in 1980 and was like, why do you want to be president? Ted Kennedy just kind of sat there for, like
it's the next
40 seconds.
Step for me and my family.
Exactly. and there's candidates like that, I think, at all different levels who just sort of think, well, I don't know, because I want to be on the park board, or I don't know, because I want to, like, kind of, and it's sort of like, or the other one that I'll see sometimes is that people will say, somebody will be running for, this did happen to me in a previous cycle. I interviewed somebody who was running for mayor of Minneapolis, and I asked them about, like, well, why are you running? What do you want to do? And they talked to me, they answered the question over the course of several minutes in more of a thing like this, about all the things that were wrong with schools and public schools in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I said, I get all of, why are you not running for school board?
Right.
I don't understand. The mayor of Minneapolis has a bully pulpit maybe on some education issues, but if you are this passionate about Minneapolis public schools, it seems like you should be running for school board.
Well, and that, I've had similar things where, like, they're worried about the schools, and that's why they're voting for a city council person of here or there. And it's like, well, but they have nothing to do with that, right? But I think genuinely, and this is part of the lack of more organizations like mine or out there, is that people don't, and I'm learning as I go, because our local government is very complicated. Like,
it is.
School board, the overlap between the city and the county and the state and all the various grants and programs.
The Metropolitan Council.
Yeah, it's complicated.
We have one of the thickest layers of, or most multi-layered sort of municipal levels anywhere in the country here in the Twin Cities. So I'm totally with you. I think that the reason I encourage people, especially if they if they are people who are tuned into this, is that you'll find out potentially if there are people who are maybe misguided or haven't really thought about that question. But then on a maybe to end on a more optimistic note, you will also hear from candidates who have thought really deeply about, you know what? If I were mayor or if I were on the city council, I know I've thought about the programs and I've thought about the budget lines. And I know that if we could move this money here and I could tie in with this thing that's happening in the county that's now we can connect with the city, if we can pull these different players together, then I think that we could really make an impact on X, Y, and Z things. And you will, again, I don't want to paint this, I'm trying to paint this. It is like there are people who really care about this, have thought about it, have thought about what the tools in the toolbox of those different offices are. And when you start to hear that, you're like, oh, that's very compelling. That's interesting. You really do have a vision for what you could do there. And I think that that will probably help a lot of people think about, oh, I get it. I get why you might be actually really good and compelling in this role.
And to also end on an optimistic note, I will say that of all the people that I've interviewed, I've found like they really do care about what they're doing. And,
absolutely.
And I don't think being a candidate is easy, and I don't think being in office in this city is easy. And so I have a lot of respect for the people who have thrown their hat in the ring and are working really hard to talk to people and get these ideas out here.
100%.
I mean, I don't agree with everything that they're doing necessarily, but I appreciate that for the most part, I think they are trying to move the city forward.
100%. I mean, we got to wrap up probably, so I'll just say, be kind and thoughtful with the people who are running for office, even if you really disagree with them. They are going out there. They're doing the work. So you can be polite in being like, thanks, but no thanks, or I appreciate it, but I'm going a different way. There is no reason, there is no good in my mind that comes from being nasty, being petty, being cruel, especially to people who are trying to do as best they can, hopefully, for our community. So I would just really encourage everybody, be kind to them, but also be kind to your neighbors and the other people in our community. Because, again, this is kind of a time when people can get tense and you can see the wrong lawn sign in somebody's yard and your hackles can go up. And we are all in this together at the end of the day, and we are all neighbors. And so please just be good to each other as much as you possibly can. And I want to thank you for doing all the work that you're doing.
Well, you're doing a great job. So thank you for coming on and being the turning the tables.
I appreciate it. Hey, everybody, this has been Better Minneapolis with me, Tane Danger, and the actual host and proprietor of Better Minneapolis, Mr. Terry White. So thank you all so much for watching, listening, and most importantly, vote. If you live in Minneapolis or St. Paul, vote by November 4th. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.